Have you ever walked into a performance review feeling confident and then suddenly started thinking, this is it. They're finally going to realize I don't know what I'm doing.
Maybe you've been praised by your manager, received a promotion, or completed successful projects, but somehow you still feel like you don't deserve to be there.
If that sounds familiar, you're definitely not alone.
You know, it's interesting. Some of the most successful professionals in the world have experienced exactly the same feeling. It's called imposter syndrome, and it can affect people at every stage of their careers.
The problem isn't usually your skills. The problem is often the story you're telling yourself.
Today, we're going to have an honest conversation about career confidence, professionalism, and the language people use when they're struggling with self-doubt at work. All right, let's begin.
Leo, can I ask you something a little personal?
Of course, what's on your mind?
Imagine it's the morning of your annual performance review. You've been with your company for almost 3 years, you've delivered projects on time, your coworkers enjoy working with you, your manager has never given you negative feedback. But as you're walking into that meeting, your heart is racing because you're convinced today's the day they'll discover you're not actually good at your job. Have you ever felt something like that?
Honestly, more than once. And what's funny is that every time I looked back afterward, I realized there had never been any evidence that I was failing. Almost all of the fear came from my own thoughts.
That's such an important point. Sometimes our minds create stories that feel completely real, even when the facts tell a different story.
Exactly. I remember my first big presentation at work. I spent almost 2 weeks preparing. I practiced every evening, I anticipated difficult questions, I even rehearsed in front of a mirror. But 10 minutes before the meeting started, I kept thinking, someone else could explain this better. I'm gonna forget everything. They're going to realize they picked the wrong person.
That's incredible, because from the outside, people probably thought you looked calm.
That's the strange thing. Afterwards, several coworkers told me, "Great presentation. You explained everything clearly. You handled those questions really well." Meanwhile, my own brain was saying, "You just got lucky."
That's one of the classic signs of imposter syndrome. Instead of accepting success, people explain it away. They think, I was lucky. The project was easy. People are just being nice. Instead of saying, I worked hard and I earned this.
Exactly. It's almost like your brain refuses to let you take credit for your own accomplishments.
Have you ever noticed how differently we evaluate ourselves compared to other people?
Absolutely. If a coworker makes one mistake during a meeting, I usually think everyone makes mistakes. But if I make one small mistake, I replay it in my mind for 3 days.
I think a lot of people do that. We extend kindness to everyone else, but when it comes to ourselves, our standards become almost impossible to meet.
And that can become exhausting. Instead of celebrating progress, you're constantly trying to prove you deserve your position.
Which brings us to another interesting point. Do you think confidence and competence are the same thing?
No, I don't. I've met incredibly talented people who doubted themselves every day, and I've also met people with much less experience who sounded extremely confident.
That's true. Confidence isn't always an accurate measurement of ability. Sometimes the quietest person in the room knows the most.
Exactly. And sometimes the loudest person is simply more comfortable speaking. There's a difference.
That's a useful word to remember. Competence. Competence means having the ability, knowledge, and skills to do something well. Notice that competence and confidence are related, but they're not the same thing. Someone can be highly competent and still struggle with confidence.
That's a great distinction. When I first learned that, it completely changed how I viewed myself. Instead of asking, do I feel confident, I started asking, have I prepared? Do I understand my work? Can I solve problems? Those questions are based on facts instead of emotions.
I love that approach. Feelings change from day to day. Evidence is much more reliable.
Exactly. And speaking of evidence, can I tell you about something that happened a few months ago?
Please do.
My manager invited me to a meeting with senior leadership. At first, I thought they probably just need someone to take notes. Then the meeting started. Halfway through, my manager looked at me and said, "Leo, why don't you explain the proposal?" I completely froze.
Oh no.
Inside, I was panicking. I thought, there are directors in this room. They have 20 years of experience. What am I doing here?
Did you tell yourself you didn't belong?
Exactly. That was the sentence repeating in my head. I don't belong here.
That's such a common thought, but let's examine it. Why did your manager invite you?
Because I had designed most of the solution.
Who understood the details better than anyone else?
Probably me.
Then maybe you weren't there by accident. Maybe you were there because you had earned your place.
When you say it like that, it sounds obvious, but in the moment, I couldn't see it.
That's the challenge with imposter syndrome. It changes the way we interpret reality. Instead of thinking, my manager trusts me, we think, my manager doesn't know I'm not qualified.
Exactly. We assume everyone else has accurate information except ourselves.
And then something interesting happens. We start working twice as hard, not because the work requires it, but because we're trying to justify our existence.
I know that feeling. There was a period when I answered emails late at night. I volunteered for every project, I skipped lunch breaks, not because anyone asked me to, because I thought if I slowed down, people would notice I wasn't good enough.
Did anyone ever tell you that?
No, not once. Actually, my manager eventually said, "Leo, you need to stop working so many hours."
That's almost ironic. You were trying to prove your value while your manager was worried about your well-being.
Exactly. Looking back, I realized I confused overworking with professionalism. They're not the same thing.
That's an excellent point. Being professional doesn't mean constantly proving yourself. It means being reliable, respectful, prepared, and willing to learn.
I wish someone had told me that earlier.
Maybe someone did. Maybe you just weren't ready to believe it.
That's fair. Sometimes encouragement doesn't stick because our inner voice is louder.
Can I ask you another question?
Go ahead.
What do you think people are actually evaluating during a performance review?
Years ago, I would have said they're deciding whether I deserve to keep my job. Now, I think it's more like they're discussing my growth. They're looking at what went well, what I learned, where I can improve, how they can support my development. It's much more collaborative than I imagined.
I completely agree. Many employees walk into those meetings expecting a courtroom. In reality, most managers want to have a conversation.
Exactly. Although I know not every workplace is perfect. Some managers are better than others. But even then, assuming the worst before the conversation begins usually doesn't help.
That's true. And there's another habit many professionals have. When they receive positive feedback, they immediately reject it. For example, a manager says, "You did an excellent job leading that project." The employee replies, "Oh, it wasn't really me. The team did everything. I just got lucky."
I used to say that all the time.
Me too. But here's something I learned. Accepting a compliment doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you professional.
That's a difficult lesson for many people, especially if they've been taught to always be modest.
There's a healthy balance. Instead of saying, "I'm the best," you can simply say, "Thank you. I really appreciate that." Or, "I'm glad the project turned out well." Those responses acknowledge the compliment without exaggerating your abilities.
I like those. They're confident without sounding boastful.
Exactly. And confidence often sounds much quieter than people imagine. It doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to dominate the room. Sometimes confidence simply sounds like, "Thank you. I'll take a look. I don't know yet, but I'll find out. I appreciate the feedback."
Actually, could you repeat that last expression? You said, "I'll find out."
Of course. I don't know yet, but I'll find out. It's a very professional phrase. You're not pretending to have every answer. Instead, you're showing that you're willing to learn and take responsibility.
I really like that, because sometimes people think admitting uncertainty makes them look weak.
In many situations, pretending to know something you don't understand is far more damaging than honestly saying you'll look into it.
That's true, and I think that's where real confidence begins. Not pretending to be perfect, but trusting yourself enough to keep learning.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
You know, Anna, something changed for me after that performance review. Not immediately. I didn't walk out of the meeting feeling like a completely different person, but one sentence my manager said stayed with me.
What did they say?
He looked at me and said, "Leo, I think you're much harder on yourself than anyone else is." At first, I laughed because I didn't know how to respond, but later that evening, I kept thinking about it. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had been carrying around expectations that nobody had actually placed on me.
That's a powerful realization. Sometimes we create invisible standards and then spend years trying to reach them. The difficult part is that the finish line keeps moving.
Exactly. Every achievement became the new minimum. When I finished a successful project, I didn't celebrate. I immediately asked myself, okay, but can I do it again? Then after the next project, can I do it with a bigger client? Then, can I lead an entire team? There was never a moment when I allowed myself to simply enjoy the progress I'd made.
That's something I think many professionals can relate to. Ambition is healthy, wanting to grow is healthy, but constantly moving the goalposts can make success feel impossible.
I like that expression, moving the goalposts. Could you explain it for everyone watching?
Of course, when we say someone is moving the goalposts, we mean they're changing the standards after progress has already been made. Imagine you're playing soccer. The goal is in one place. Just before you score, someone moves it farther away. Suddenly, success becomes much harder. Many people unknowingly do this to themselves. They achieve one goal, but immediately replace it with another, so they never feel accomplished.
That describes my mindset perfectly a few years ago. No matter what happened, I felt like I hadn't done enough.
Can I ask something? If one of your coworkers came to you and said, "I've received positive feedback every year, I've been promoted, my manager trusts me, but I still think I'm terrible at my job," what would you tell them?
I'd probably ask, what evidence do you have that you're terrible?
That's interesting. Would you ask yourself that same question?
Honestly, probably not. Isn't that strange? We're often much more logical when helping other people than when judging ourselves.
Exactly. That's why talking with someone you trust can be so valuable. Sometimes another person helps us see facts that we've completely overlooked.
Speaking of facts, I started keeping something my mentor called a success journal.
I've heard of those. How did you use it?
Every Friday afternoon before shutting down my computer, I wrote down 3 things. One challenge I solved, one compliment or positive piece of feedback I received, and one thing I learned that week. At first, it felt a little awkward. I thought, this seems unnecessary. But after several months, something surprising happened. Whenever I started doubting myself, I had pages of evidence showing that I was actually growing.
I really like that idea because our memories aren't always objective. We tend to remember embarrassing moments much more vividly than successful ones.
Exactly. I could remember every awkward sentence I'd ever said in a meeting, but I completely forgot the dozens of meetings that had gone well.
Our brains can have a negativity bias. That means they naturally pay more attention to problems than successes. It's one reason criticism often feels louder than praise.
That explains a lot. I could receive 10 positive comments and spend the entire evening thinking about one small suggestion for improvement.
Many people do exactly that. Constructive feedback is important, but it shouldn't erase everything you've done well.
That's another phrase worth remembering, constructive feedback. Instead of simply criticizing someone, constructive feedback is intended to help them improve. A good manager doesn't just point out problems, they also offer guidance and support.
That's right, and receiving constructive feedback doesn't mean you're failing. It usually means someone believes you're capable of getting even better.
I wish I had understood that earlier. For years, I interpreted every suggestion as proof that I wasn't good enough. Now I see suggestions as opportunities to grow.
Growth is an interesting word because it's ongoing. No professional ever reaches a point where there's absolutely nothing left to learn. Even experts continue learning.
That's reassuring. Sometimes social media makes it seem like everyone else has everything figured out.
I'm glad you mentioned that. We compare our behind-the-scenes experience to everyone else's highlight reel. We see promotions, awards, announcements, successful presentations, but we rarely see the doubts, mistakes, and difficult days that happened before those successes.
Exactly. Someone posts, "I'm excited to announce my new leadership position." What they don't post is, "I spent 6 months wondering if I was qualified."
That's such an important reminder. Confidence doesn't usually appear overnight. It's built through experience, through learning, through making mistakes, and continuing anyway.
Can I ask something? Can I tell you another story?
Absolutely.
So, last year, a new employee joined our department. She seemed incredibly confident. She asked thoughtful questions, she contributed ideas during meetings. I remember thinking, I wish I had that level of confidence. A few months later, we were talking over coffee. She smiled and said, "Can I tell you a secret?" I said, "Sure." She said, "I'm terrified every time I speak during meetings." I couldn't believe it. From my perspective, she looked completely comfortable.
That's fascinating. It reminds us that we can't accurately measure someone else's confidence just by looking at them. Everyone is dealing with something we probably don't know about.
Exactly. It made me realize I wasn't the only one having those internal conversations. I was just the only one who could hear them.
That's a beautiful way to describe it. We hear every one of our own doubts, but we rarely hear anyone else's. So naturally, we assume we're the only ones struggling.
And that's usually not true.
Not at all. In fact, many high performers experience imposter syndrome precisely because they care deeply about doing good work. They set high standards, they prepare carefully, they want to contribute. Those qualities are strengths. The challenge comes when those strengths turn into constant self-criticism.
There's definitely a balance. You want to care about quality without expecting perfection.
Exactly. Perfection is impossible. Professionalism is achievable. There's a huge difference.
I like that. Could you say it one more time?
Of course, perfection is impossible. Professionalism is achievable. Professionalism means showing up prepared, treating people respectfully, communicating clearly, learning from mistakes, keeping your commitments whenever possible. None of those require perfection.
That's much healthier than trying to be flawless.
And it also creates a better work environment. Think about the managers you've respected most. Were they perfect?
No, not even close. The best managers I've worked with admitted when they didn't know something. They asked questions, they listened, they apologized when necessary. That actually made me trust them more.
Exactly. Authenticity builds credibility. Pretending to be perfect usually has the opposite effect.
You know what's interesting? I still have moments of self-doubt, even now. Before important meetings, before presentations, before interviews, those feelings haven't disappeared completely.
Mine haven't either. The difference is that I don't automatically believe every anxious thought anymore.
That's such a valuable distinction. Thoughts aren't always facts. Just because your mind says you're going to fail doesn't mean it's true.
Exactly. Sometimes our minds are trying to protect us from disappointment, but they end up creating unnecessary fear instead.
Nowadays, before a challenging meeting, I ask myself 3 questions. Did I prepare? Am I willing to learn? Will I do my best? If the answer is yes, I remind myself that's enough. Everything else is outside my control.
I love that. It's simple, practical, and realistic.
I think that's the biggest lesson I've learned. Confidence isn't believing you'll never make mistakes. Confidence is believing you'll be able to handle them when they happen.
That's beautifully said. Because mistakes are part of every career. Every successful person has made them. The difference is that successful people don't let mistakes define who they are. They learn, adjust, and keep moving forward.
Exactly. Instead of saying, I made a mistake, therefore I'm a failure, they say, I made a mistake, therefore I learned something. Those are completely different stories.
And the stories we tell ourselves matter, because eventually we start believing them. If you constantly tell yourself you're not good enough, you'll begin interpreting every situation through that lens. But if you tell yourself, I'm still learning, I'm improving, I've overcome challenges before, then your perspective begins to change.
Not overnight, but gradually. One conversation, one project, one experience at a time.
That's right. Building confidence is much more like exercising than flipping a switch. Small, consistent actions make a big difference over time.
So if you're watching today and you've ever felt like you don't belong or that everyone else is somehow more qualified than you, we hope this conversation reminds you of something important. You are probably judging yourself much harsher than everyone else is.
Keep preparing, keep learning, keep asking questions, keep improving your English. And remember, you don't have to be perfect to be professional.
You also don't have to know every answer. Sometimes the most confident sentence you can say is, I don't know yet, but I'll find out.
Exactly. Learning never stops, and that's something to be proud of, not embarrassed by.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's conversation. We hope you not only practiced your English, but also walked away feeling a little more confident in your professional journey.
If you enjoyed this episode and found these workplace expressions useful, please give this video a like and subscribe to the English Talk channel. Every week, we create natural conversations to help you speak English with more confidence in real-life situations.
And we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced imposter syndrome at work? What helps you feel more confident? Share your thoughts in the comments below. It's a great way to practice your English and connect with learners from around the world.
Thank you for practicing with us today. Keep learning, keep